Tomorrow is Mother's Day, when we all think of our mothers, right? All right. And I've been thinking all week about my mother, and so I'm going to tell you a real long children's story today, okay? A real long children's story. Thank you, Sebastian. Get that up there so you can hear better. All righty. Need to have to turn the projector on to get it focused, and we'll show you some pictures. My story begins today with my mother. She was born in Australia. That's kind of a long ways away, isn't it? Her father and mother met in Australia. And pretty soon you're going to see a picture, I hope, of her coming up here. And I'll just keep telling you the story because there's a lot of little stories I want to tell. My great-grandfather, who was my mother's what? Grandfather. Okay. He worked for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As a young man, he accepted Jesus when he was 20 years old. He worked in the store with his father. They had a family business. And his dad said, "You got to work on Saturdays to keep my business going." He says, "But Dad, I can't. It's the Sabbath. I go to church on Sabbath. I can't work." And there was such a big argument and such a big fight that he said, "I guess I'm going to have to leave home." So he left home and decided, what else can I do except sell books? He had heard about a colportering and selling books. That's what a lot of young people did. And they went out to sell books. And he sold books for about 7 years. He was very successful at that. In fact, they made him the group leader. Then they made him the district leader. And he taught other kids how to sell books too. And they just went so well that the conference at Pennsylvania said, "We want you to be a pastor and pastor a church." He said, "Oh, I'd love to pastor a church." "Well, okay. We'd like you to go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." And he said, "That's fantastic. I'd like to go to Philadelphia." You know why? Because that's where his mom and dad lived. Okay, so he went where his mother was and dad lived. And the very day that he started selling those books, there was one person at the top of his prayer list. Every day he prayed for his mom, that she would learn to love Jesus. Now he thought that his dad would never, ever learn that. So what do we need, a hammer? Let me just take a look and see what happens here. Something isn't advancing or whatever. Let's try that. That's it. Okay. Boy, that's not going to show up very good there. Okay. The first verse that we have up on our screen is Isaiah 66:13. Will you all help me read that together? Okay. "As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you." And my great-grandpa prayed and prayed for my mother, that she would accept the comfort of Jesus. There she is, my mother, one of the youngest pictures I have of her. Can you see where she's in front of? Sanitarium. Anybody know anything about sanitariums? This is the sanitarium in Australia. Okay, that's her mother pushing her there. Now that's who I'm telling you about, my great-grandfather or her grandpa. Okay, these are all the places that he worked through his lifetime in the church. So he went back to Pennsylvania, I told you that, and he started working there. First of all, he organized the church, and the first thing that they needed to do was have a big series of meetings, evangelistic meetings. So he preached there in West Philadelphia, where he was a pastor, and he helped the pastor in North Philadelphia too. In fact, they had a morning service in Philadelphia at the north on Sabbath morning. Sabbath afternoon at 1:30, they had church in the West Philadelphia church. So they said, "We need to fill this church up. We want to invite other members to come." So they had the evangelistic series, and he prayed that his mother would come, but his mother didn't come. And he prayed some more. And they says, we need to build a church here. So they raised enough money. They bought a lot. Then they sold that lot and bought another lot. And they pitched a tent on that lot. And it was real noisy. The cars were going back and forth. And the carts and all kinds of noise. And this is too noisy. So they found another lot. And they sold that other lot. And they had enough for their building fund. So they started doing it. And to make a long story short, they were able to finish their church enough so that they could get inside the church. And when they got inside the church, J.S. Washburn, who was there, said this: Sister Lukens became a Seventh-day Adventist in 1904. She was baptized by her son, Elder Lukens, being the first person to be baptized in the West Philadelphia Seventh-day Adventist Church. From the time of her baptism in 1904 until her death, she was a most earnest member, loved and truly respected by everyone who knew her. Her family and many friends mourn their loss, but not as those without hope. Did God answer his prayer as a young man for his mother? And what a joy it was to see that she was the first one baptized in the church that they worked so hard to build together. There's a picture of my great-grandfather with my great-grandmother. Well, they had gone over to Australia, and they worked real hard there, organizing the work and getting it going, because it was just starting out. There was just a few hundred members when they came. They held evangelistic meetings. He recruited young people to go out and sell books. What did they call those people that sell books? Okay, everybody back there knows, but call porters. They're the ones that sold the books. And so he got them selling books. And he just loved young people. He loved to talk about young people. Now, he was quite a go-getter. You see what kind of a top this car has? You got that, a convertible. He was a young thinking, young man, preacher. I don't know about having a convertible. And there is, you see in the blue, that's from my mother's perspective. Here's my mom's parents. They were 20 and 22 years of age. And this preacher's kid married an Australian. Where do you think they would live? Usually when you marry a woman, the woman wants to live at home, right? That's what usually happens. Isn't that right, Mrs. Mulholland? But when T. Ray decided he was going to go back home to America, his bride says, "Oh, I'd like to go to America too." And so with a 9-month-old baby, they came, which was my mother, they came back to the United States. And they said there was about 100 people that came out when they came into town to see if she was black or a black Aborigine or a white baby. And they were all, look at that, that was her. Here they are. My grandpa and grandma were so busy with church work, they didn't have a lot of time to get together with different things. And so my mom really didn't tell any stories about my great-grandpa to me. I had to go and read old magazines to figure out all the types of things that I'm sharing with you today about him. There's my mom over there on the right, sitting on the steps with her 2 sisters. And one of the questions that came up at the dinner table that night was, where do babies come from? You always want to know where babies came from? And you know what my grandpa told her? The J.E. Eaton catalog. Now, that's the same like Sears and Roebuck catalog. You've heard of the Sears and Roebuck catalog before? Anyway, it's a big, thick book like this, like Amazon, okay? It has all the stuff like Amazon has in it, okay? And so you go, and that's the way they would search it. So my grandpa says, "Oh, check on Amazon. That's where the babies come from." It's what he would say today. And, well, okay, so here's a picture of her about that same age. They really worked her. In fact, she did a lot of babysitting. Any of you do babysitting for the kids? Okay, all right, you know that. And so one day her mother said, "Ellie, will you go to the post office today?" It had just snowed, just like this. And so there it was in Calgary, Canada, where they lived at this particular time. And so it was real fresh snow. So she went to the post office, and it was kind of hard because the snow was kind of deep. And so she kind of had to pick up her feet to walk along to get to the post office. She arrived at the post office, and the person at the window says, "Oh, hi, Ellie. There's a special box that has come today." "Oh, really?" "Yeah." And here was a big box like this. She says to herself, I don't know if I can carry this or not. And she looked. Why? Look at it. It says J.E. Eaton. Oh, I think I heard Mom and Dad talking about us getting a baby. So she took this box, and it was so heavy, she actually found those footprints that she had walked in before, the same footprints carrying this big, heavy box all the way back home. When she got home, came up in the steps, and came in the front door, dropped the box, and says, I don't want to have any more brothers and sisters, and walked off. Okay. But there was born one more, fourth child, Morris, right down here. He was named after his grandfather. Okay, there he is, Morris, right there. Okay, so you have Morris, had Morris, had Morris. You get the idea? Okay, like Stan, Morris the third. Okay, so, any of you do diaries? You used to? Okay. My mom did diaries for just a little bit. And here's what she wrote in her diary, one of the things here. What kind of grades did she get? She never told me, but it was in her diary. And when she passed away, I was able to read through her diary. And that's what I found out about her. Also, here's from her diary here. You see what they have here? Do you know what kind of car that is? It was a new car. Okay. I think it was a Chevy. But so forth here. And they had a lot of fun together. When she was in college, you can see right here, sitting right there, that's my dad before they got married. Okay, sitting with the family there. My grandpa, he moved from, the family moved from Canada to Emmanuel Missionary College. Ever heard of that before? It's called Andrews University now. They changed the name. It sounds a little more prestigious. But he was the business manager for College Wood Products. And in 1938, that was a year just before my mother graduated, this is how many lawn chairs they did, novelties, tables. They made all this in this building down here. Okay, so he was quite a businessman here. And my mom, she was a secretarial major, very good at that. She also liked music, played the saxophone. Here's a saxophone quartet that she was in. Just let me add this because I'll probably run out of time. At the end of her life, she didn't recognize me. She had what's called Alzheimer's disease. And she would call me in the early stages of it. She would call me by my dad's name. So who do you think she thought I was? Yeah, she thought I was her husband. And she, after a few more years, she didn't know who I was, and I'd have to tell her who I was. Hi, I'm your son, Ted. Oh. But then she couldn't tell me what had happened. She couldn't tell me what she'd eaten that day. She didn't recognize too many people. But there's one thing that she really enjoyed. That was when music was played. And when the music played, she became active, and she would get up and sit up straight, and she would clap her hands and that kind of thing, especially to the old music that she remembered. And that's what brought her to life. Nothing else would bring her to life except music. Really important. They were married. Guess what day they were married? On the same day my mother's parents were married, April 28th. And kind of interesting enough, my brother was born on that same date too, April 28th. It's quite an easy day to remember. Anniversary, birthday, and so forth and so on there. They got married, newlyweds. Well, so they were out preaching. And here's a picture of my dad here with his brother, evangelistic crusade for Christ, Calkins Brothers Youth Building, and so forth. Here's the tent that they preached in, and so forth. Now these brothers, they started out preaching, but my one uncle, he had gotten married, but my dad hadn't gotten married. So you know what my dad was doing, thinking about all the time? His sweet Ellie back in Berrien Springs. And it only took about a year, and they were married. Here's from the diary here, 1944. Everything comes on a Friday. A lonely modern house for $4,800 on Ethel Street. Saw the house just before sunset. Oh, the bank won't take our mortgage. January 14. After a lot of prayer, we're actually in possession of 155 Ethel Street. I'm anxious to see how we feel about possession 2 years from now. Why did she say that? Well, that's a picture of their first home. And guess what? Every place my dad went, they built something. Either an addition on a church or a school or whatever. There's always something being built. Of course, Wisconsin Rapids Church, see that? They almost doubled the size of the church there. Okay. 5-year diary. Erling was ordained this Sabbath. Well, I need to hasten on here because I want to tell you some other stories. Pastors' families back then moved a lot. 10 years. Guess how many times they moved? 10 times. So what's the average stay for a pastor? 1 year. And to think of it, you see here back here in Pocatello, I'm not exactly sure how long there, but I know that in 1947 they were living there. So, and then Twin Falls in 48 and 40, so you kind of get the idea there. Okay, a lot of moving. Second verse. Luke 13:34. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. These are the words of Jesus, okay? The Sabbath school lesson was about mothers or women in the Bible. And here Jesus is in Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often would I have wanted to gather your children together as what? Okay, first animal I want you to remember is a hen, okay? Whenever those little baby chicks are in danger, what does she do? Gathers them together and puts them under her wings and protects them. And I could tell you another story about a mother hen that when there was a fire, they'd come and covered up her little ones, and everything around them burned up, and the mother's life was taken, but her little chicks were spared because they were underneath her wings. That's the picture I want as we look at this. My mom made sure that we got together with her family every Christmas, and here we all gather together here. There I am there, right there, okay? Okay. Now then, the next year, in front, going back home again, and I want you to see those two guys there? Now then, this fellow's parents lived in India. We were living at the time in Nevada. My other uncle was living in Santa Rosa, and another one of the children was practicing medicine in Ohio. How did they communicate? They had what is called a chain letter. Each one would write what's happening there, put in their letter with everybody else's from the family. They would take the one out that the last one would go to, and so they would send, there were 4 children, so they would send 5 letters together, okay? And they all had to write on this real thin India paper because the Holfords lived in India, okay? So they would have this chain letter going around. Okay. So now then, when the event happened that I was born, my mother wrote, guess what? We have a boy, and we're going to name him after my dad. Theodore. Okay. So I got the name Theodore from this T. Ray, which was my grandfather's name. Okay. So the chain letter went around. When it came to India, guess what? They had named their son after my grandpa too. So there were 2 Theodores in the family. Okay. So we all got together. I can show you family reunion pictures. Another animal I want you to remember. What do you think this one is? I will meet them like a bear deprived of her cubs. Do you want to get in the way between a mother bear and her cubs? You've heard about stories about that, right? Sometimes you eat the bear, right? Sometimes the bear eats you. So watch out, especially if there's cubs. Okay. So I'm going to tell you one little story here about this person here. That's my brother. We were in the Safeway store in Twin Falls, Idaho. And Steve was in the shopping cart. And you know what I like to do? I like to give it a push like this and get on it and go, and he was in the front. Come around, turn it around. Mom, coming back. Get like this, get on the cart. We go like this. Boom! The cart fell over. And guess what? My brother's leg was stretched out in a funny angle. Oh, my parents were sick. My dad, oh no, look at that. So the clerk there says, we need to get a splint on it. My dad says, no, I'm getting to the hospital right away. So he carefully lifted him up, put him into the car. My mom drove him to the hospital. And back in those days, they'd practiced medicine a little bit differently. They said, okay, Steve is going to have to go into traction. You know what traction is? Okay. They put some rails up on the bed and the pulleys, and they came down. And so they came and they actually put his legs higher than his head up there, hanging him like that, okay? Now this little young 4-year-old was just totally miserable. So he kept going this way, pulling this way, pulling this way. And he just fought that and fought that and fought that. Well, my mom and dad were just at his bedside all the time. And of course I was, my mom was just there wanting to protect him. But he just fought it so much that actually the heels were worn so that the skin was worn off of his heels and they were bloody. That was a terrible thing. And so the doctor says, okay, we got to do something different. So they actually put him in a cast from the waist down, both feet, and put a dowel between the two of them to keep them lined up. And there he was in that cast for a number of weeks, got out of the cast, and he actually had to learn to walk all over again. Terrible story. So who gets blamed about the shopping cart? I'm the bad guy. Okay. Now I said wherever my dad went, we built. Okay. There was a church. Remember them building there. And my parents believed in Christian education. Here's my third grade class. If you read that very carefully, it says San Fernando Valley Academy. Yes, built a brand new school there at San Fernando Valley Academy. Well, my mom was a good, loyal pastor's wife, did a lot of interesting things. Guess what? 50 years ago, I graduated from high school. 25th anniversary. Some kids, my parents were out visiting one Sabbath afternoon, and some kids saw the way that they were walking up to the house and so forth, and says, did you guys just get married? My dad says, yeah, we just got married 25 years ago. Okay. When you get married, remember this. My mother was afraid that she was going to lose her son. But you know what I told her? I said, you're not going to lose a son, you're going to gain a daughter. And that's just what happened. My wife became a daughter to my mom. And what a joy it was to work together. I could tell you about a general conference time when we were all together, 5 preachers together, my cousin and my Uncle Everett. Some of you have heard of him. My Uncle Harold. There's Ross, the one that wrote our song today that we sang. Okay. I went to General Conference Atlantic City, and my parents loved kids so much. My mom says, we got to help in the primary department. They were in charge of the primary department, General Conference. They paid my way because I led the songs. That was fun, just leading songs. I got my way paid. Here's a tribute my dad wrote about my mother. In all these experiences, my wife, Ellie, has stood by my side and supported me. Without her encouragement and leadership, we could never have kept such an active church program going. And she was just there. What an example she was. In her prayers, please, Lord, whatever my boys want to do, help them. They didn't say you have to do this or have to do that. That was my choice of what I did. Now, Dolly, I'm showing you this picture. This is her first grandchild. What a joy that is to see that and to hold that. And congratulations to Mrs. Mulholland for that experience, to have that. There is Stacy holding little Heather right there, and so on. Now I hate the camp meetings. Yes, they loved kids, and I remember silk screening these 10 commandments on clear pieces of plastic. Had us all involved doing something of this kind of thing, doing camp meeting. I actually used this backdrop at Pacific Union College when I was in charge of the primary department, the kids there, and so forth. She loved child evangelism. I'd say she was a child evangelist in 1982, the Arizona camp meeting, SoCal next year. She was actually sharing her experience of how to be a successful Sabbath school leader. I want to end with this story. My mother and dad got to go on a trip, kind of a worldwide trip that they took. They went to Hong Kong. And at Hong Kong, when you're traveling, sometimes the food is a little different. And so they had a lot of rice there. So as they were eating rice, my mom says, boy, this rice feels like they got a rock in the rice. Got to be careful, Erling. And so she's kind of chewing and stuff. And man, I got to get rid of this rock. And put it down. It was a beautiful white chunk White rock with white rice? Well, that's part, felt with her tongue. That's part of my tooth. And so what are you going to do traveling? They still had a number of weeks to go and to finish his trip. My dad says, well, let's go to the Hong Kong hospital. That's the Adventist hospital. I think they have some dentists that are working there too. So they went to the hospital, looked up a dentist. We'll take anybody because to get rid of this thing. He says, okay. So came in, the doctor says, okay, I'll work you in. Just wait right here. And so forth, and came into the room. And so the doctor says, Calkins. I remember that name. Were you the pastor back in Pocatello, Idaho? Well, yeah. Oh, okay. I remember you came to my house. Oh, really? Yeah. You came to visit my mother. Oh, okay. And so they talked and this kind of thing. And a couple hours later, my mom's tooth was all fixed and this kind of thing. So my dad comes and says, okay, now how much, I want to pay for this. How much is it? I'll pay you. And Dr. Everson, he says, you've already paid me. What do you mean you already paid me? I haven't paid you. Yes, you already paid me. Payment in full. Well, no, here. No, I won't take anything. It's already paid for. Why? He says, well, I don't know if you remember or not coming to my house, but when you came to my house to visit my mother, you brought me a brand new Eversharp pencil. Paid in full with one Eversharp pencil. Loving Lord, we thank you so much that we can take this time to honor our mothers. It's a gift that you've given to us that we can appreciate your love. We can see how much you love us because of the love that you have given through our mothers. Thank you so much for this gift. Now may the love of God and the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the fellowship that we have one with another be with you all, always. Amen.
Pastor?
Yeah, Tommy?
The children don't understand the amen of the older people. I'd like to have an applause for the children in their program today.
Okay, let's do that. We're certainly thankful that our school kids, we love them so much and we appreciate our school and especially the leadership of Mrs. Mulholland and Mrs. Gingery. Lord bless you. And just go ahead and go out first, okay?